Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Jasmine Nolan Eccles. We are calling today's meeting on May 6, 2024, 4:30 p.m. for the Charter Commission of the City of St. Louis to order. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. With a simple left-hand vote, we're going to approve the agenda for today. All commissioners in favor of the existing and current agenda?
Aye.
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 That is the majority of commissioners. We have approved the agenda as is. The second item on the agenda is the roll call and approval of the April 15th regular meeting. From Secretary Bobo. Thank you.
Yes, I will go ahead and say names. If you could just designate that you are here by saying yes or saying present. Chair Nolan Eccles. Vice Chair Sheridan.
Present.
Commissioner Crossland.
Present.
Commissioner Dwight.
Present.
Parliamentarian Garth. And I do have a note that he won't be able to join us this evening. Commissioner Grant.
Present.
Commissioner Intagliata.
Present.
Commissioner Riley.
Present.
Thank you. And Secretary Bobo, I am also here, present. And I will now call the non-voting members. The Honorable Joseph Vollmer, Director Casey Milberg, Ms. Tiara Thomas, Director Christine Ingracia, City Councilor Sheena Hamilton, Director Sonia Gray, and Mr. Jake Hummel. That concludes the roll call. I will now hold a moment to approve our last meeting minutes, which were on April 15th. They were virtual. So I'll now allow time for that. Are there any motions for approval or any discussion?
I move that we accept the minutes as have been presented.
Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Chair Nolan Eccles, can I say something before we continue?
Is it germane to the next item on the agenda
It is. It's in advance of that, yes.
pertaining to the meeting agenda or the chair's report?
The meeting agenda.
Is it amendment to the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Secretary Bobo, we'd have an amendment to the agenda.
I move to suspend the agenda and immediately take up item number 9, Rules of Order and Procedure, discussion of commission conduct and officers.
Second.
All those in favor?
I believe
Aye.
we have to have discussion for the April agenda was already approved and properly seconded, correct?
Yep.
And we moved to accept the April meeting and agenda, the April minutes and agenda, correct?
Correct, but we can still have discussion around it.
And
Okay.
I made a motion to suspend the agenda and move item 9 up for discussion now.
So we just talked about the minutes. This is about the agenda for today's meeting. That's what we're currently discussing.
Okay, so we already approved the agenda for today by a show of hands and a vote, and we approved the April 15 regular meeting minutes prior. So the motion to amend or move the agenda,
To suspend the agenda and move to item number 9.
yes, so we've already approved the agenda currently. So we wouldn't be able to add a motion to change the agenda that we've already approved.
At any point, a member of the commission can move to suspend the agenda and advance an item to a different position on the agenda. as long as it's moved and seconded.
So prior to us moving the agenda or adding anything to the agenda or addressing the rules of order and procedure, I recommend that we have our legal advice as is on the agenda currently. So I recommend that we amend the agenda the motion that you just moved to include after we have legal advice.
I would like to, request at this point that we move forward with the motion and the second that's here, hearing no other additional amendments to it.
I don't have an interest in amending the motion. It has been moved and seconded, though.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries.
Moving number 9 up, rules of order and procedure, discussion of commission conduct and officers.
Oh, Commissioner Sheridan, it's still for me to
Yes, my apologies.
announce
Yes.
where we are on the agenda.
My apologies.
Thank you. So we're moving the rules of order and procedure up to item number 3. After item number 3, we're going into the chair's report and legal advice. I want to make sure that commissioners are aware that we have 2 hearings from individuals from the public related to public advocacy and the city manager and administrator, in which they are here for a 5:30 deadline. So I would like us to keep the time in mind. The time is now 4:42. Rules of order and procedure, moving to agenda item
Chair.
number 3.
Chair,
We will, and then
quick
we will.
question for clarity.
Chair's report.
5:30 Eastern Standard Time or 5:30 Central Standard Time?
I believe they're on New York time.
Okay.
So the time is now 4:43, so I just want us to be mindful of that. So we are at the rules of order and procedure amendments for all commissioners or any commissioners that have additions to the rules of order and procedure. We will then move from that item to the chair's report and then into a closed session of legal advice.
Okay, on the discussion of commission conduct and officers, Chair Nolan Eccles, what was exhibited at the April meeting, the public meeting, was unacceptable. And as a commissioner, I think it's time. We're getting close to the end of our tenure on this commission, but I do think it's time for a leadership change, and I would respectfully ask you to resign your chairship so that another chair could be installed for the continuation of this commission.
I respectfully decline your recommendation due to sunshine law violations and my speaking with the Attorney General regarding those sunshine law violations. Therefore, my recommendation is not to resign as chair of the commission and instead to have legal advice as requested. And until we do so, I do not recommend my removal of chair from the position. It is not in the sunshine law recommendations, and it's also not in our rules of order and procedure. However, the Attorney General and every attorney that I've spoken to date have cited sunshine law violations that I believe need to be recognized and addressed before we update the rules of order and procedure.
Any other commissioners have comment?
I'm a little bit confused because the issue of our chair is actually part of our rules of order and not part of sunshine and the business of the commission itself. So
The
whether we
rules of
choose,
order and procedure.
excuse me, I'm just finishing this, whether we choose to have one chair versus another, which is simply the question that's before us right now, should not pertain specifically to sunshine.
It does. So the rules of order and procedure require all commissioners to be in compliance with the sunshine law, given the fact that commissioners are not in compliance with the sunshine law, and we have legal advice pertaining to those matters. I believe those need to be addressed prior to the issue related to removing a executive member of this commission. Therefore, per my recommendations from the Attorney General and other attorneys, it is in the best interest of this commission to hear the legal advice prior to changing the rules of order and procedure.
In that case, I'd like to make a motion to entertain a vote of no confidence for our chair.
It has been moved and properly seconded for the vote of no confidence for our chair. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
And
The
Chair,
motion carries.
and Chair, with that information, again, I'll respectfully ask you to resign your position as chair, so a new chair that the commission has confidence in can carry us through to the end of the commission.
So again, I state, until I have legal advice from the Attorney General, the City Councilor, and the Mayor of the City of St. Louis to do so, I will not.
In that case, I'd like to entertain a motion to remove
I would also like to
Commissioner Nolan Eccles.
I would
Chair.
like to hear the legal advice,
Second.
City Attorney, and the County General
All those in
related
favor
to
of this
Sunshine
motion?
Law violation.
Aye.
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 Okay, it has been moved, seconded, and was that what was
That
the
was a
vote?
majority.
Did you ask for?
All those opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries.
The next order of business then would be to nominate a new chair for the Charter Commission. I'll take nominations.
I nominate our secretary, Brianna Bobo.
Is there a second for Secretary, for Brianna Bobo assuming chair? It has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Secretary Bobo, you are now Chairwoman Bobo.
Thank you. And we will continue with the agenda.
We do need to elect a new secretary, though.
Oh, we do need to elect a new secretary. So I will hold space for us to call a motion for a new secretary. Hearing any nominations?
I nominate Scott Intagliata.
Who did you nominate? I'm sorry. Oh,
Scott.
okay, it had, Chair.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion carries.
We should be going into the next agenda item.
So the next agenda item is I would like to hear a motion to suspend the suspension of the agenda so that we can hear from our guests.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries.
At this time, Madam Chair, I move to hear the legal advice related to the Sunshine Law in a closed session on item number 4 pursuant to Missouri Revised Statute Section 610.0211 as requested by the Attorney General of the State of Missouri. I would like it to be on the record if the commission denies to hear the legal advice pertaining to the state attorney general. And I would like the minutes to reflect.
Thank you, Commissioner Nolan Eccles. Moving to agenda item, were there any seconds to that? Okay, the motion dies. So now we will move to the agenda item to hear from our guests, the New York Office of Public Advocate. I believe they're on the line.
Good afternoon, peace and blessing, love and light to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and now we can see you. Thank you.
Awesome, no problem. Thank you. My name is Jamani Williams. I'm the public advocate of the city of New York. Just to point out the obvious, obviously there's some stuff going on that we're not privy to. It is just interesting to note that New York City is not the only one going through some internal political stuff. So that is some comfort. I might recommend that we might, in the future, others get invited a little bit after some of the stuff that needs to be taken care of. But we're very honored to be here. I am the 5th public advocate of the city of New York. On staff, we don't have my first deputy, Nick Smith, who's out today, but we have my chief of staff, Rance Huff, who's on the call. We have Elizabeth Guzman, my general counsel on the call. I'm just trying to go in order by what I see. Veronica Avis, chief deputy public advocate for policy. We have Matt Collin, the deputy DC, and we have Deputy Public Advocate Kashif Hussain for Infrastructure and Environment, Deputy Public Advocate Jeffrey Sever, Justice and Safety, and J.C. Brillen, who's Director of Information and Technology, Elizabeth Kennedy, who's Deputy Public Advocate for Education and Opportunity. I believe that is everyone on my team. I think Solomon Sabita was going to be on, so I'm not sure if he's on. He's the Deputy Public Advocate for Housing and Health. I think we have Isa Cortez, my Director of Executive Operations. So hopefully I got everybody on. So thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to speak. It's very, very heartened to know that folks are thinking about creating a similar position in St. Louis. As mentioned, I'm the 5th public advocate. The first public advocate was Mark Green, selected in 1994 after the 1988 Charter Commission. The position changed a little bit again after 2002. I believe there was some questions about the hiring process. The office is completely independent. So there's 3 citywide elected officials. You have the mayor, next in line is a public advocate, and then you have the comptroller. It's 4 citywide elected officials if you count the city council speaker. The speaker is elected, as I'm sure, similar in other cities, elected by the body of the city council themselves. After some charter changes, a lot of the powers that some of the things that the public advocate initially did went to the president and the speaker, and some of the changes happened as they're actually changing what the president of the city council did and gave some to the public advocate, and then some changes happened after. There's 5 charter mandated jobs of the public advocate. One is you get to introduce legislation to city council. So I'm an ex officio council member. I can introduce legislation, but I don't have a vote. I'm basically an ombudsman. That's what most people would describe the position as, and a charter cop, making sure that the charter is, the agencies are doing the job that the charter mandates they do. I have a vote on the pension board, and I have appointees to things like the City Planning Commission and the Civilian Complaint Review Board over the police department, to name a few. And there's a 6th one that's not in the charter, but I call it the bully pulpit, which just ensures that a citywide office can lift up issues and concerns that may not be lifted up by other folks, and really be a check on city government to make sure they're acting properly. It's a pretty amorphous in terms of the structure, and different public advocates have had different focuses. A great example of the previous public advocate, Tish James, who became Attorney General, was very heavily focused on as an attorney. And so this was an office with a lot of attorneys doing a lot of lawsuits on behalf of people of the city. I'm a community organizer by training. And so my office shifted a little bit to a lot of community organizers and community work, moving up and down information to the people of the city. And we do hire our own folks. The city has a hiring process, so it does fall similar under that, but everything else is autonomous. I think there was a question about weakness that we see in the office. The one, if there were changes that we can make from the beginning, we would have an independent budget, which we have now. That, for the most part, we have now. That was a change that happened in the charter, I believe, in 2019. Prior to that, the mayor could slash the budget, and in fact, former Mayor Bloomberg did cut significantly one of the public advocates. Her name was Betsy Gabam, budget, and it was very hampering. But right now, technically speaking, the budget just can't be cut unless there's a fiscal emergency. So budget autonomy is important to making sure there's an independent budget. The other one I would strengthen is having some kind of subpoena power. According to the charter, the agencies have to respond to us when we ask questions. But if they don't, the only recourse is providing lawsuits, and that actually can take some time. So having some kind of subpoena power, some way to make sure that those questions are answered, minus a lawsuit, would probably be helpful as well. The only weak point that I would see is, and it's not unique to our office, but especially in our office, depending on who's in the office, the main focus might be, how do I secure the next political job, or whether it's higher office or whether it's something else. But finding some checks to make sure that doesn't happen. Maybe certain offices you can't run from directly after public advocate, or maybe a time frame, a year or two or something, where you can't just jump right in, so folks can really focus on their job. But otherwise, I think it's a really good position to have an elevated elected official at the level of the public advocate that can call out things that need to be called out without the same constraints of trying to run a body like the speaker or the mayor, or who the problem might be, the mayor themselves, or someone that may not have the same heft of a citywide office. I feel like that's, I think, a decent summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I may have to jump soon, but my team is going to stay on to answer any questions folks may have.
At this time, commissioners, this is a great opportunity for us to dig deeper, seek greater understanding, learn a little bit. So the floor is open to the commission for further dialogue and questions at this time.
I have a question. And sir, thank you for being here today to answer our questions. We are considering amending the St. Louis City Charter to create a public advocate position like yours. I would, if you could just explain for a little bit for us, what protections exist in your city's charter to protect the independence of your position, as far as funding or keeping separate from other departments or from the mayor's authority. If you could just explain that a little to us.
Well, the charter is very explicit in the autonomy of the office and the succession of leadership in the city, so that's helpful. Where it had been troubling is the budget. As I mentioned, that was a huge problem as we were coming into office, that the budget can just be cut almost at the whim of the mayor. That's been strengthened, probably not enough, but it's been strengthened in the charter now, so that it's that they can't just cut it unless there's other extenuating economic circumstances, which I think we're going to be getting into some tense discussions in a few months of going into our budget, because it looks like, after COVID, there is some economic situations we have to try to deal with. We're trying to, right now, probably figure out and have difference of opinions what the charter meant by that, but there is some protections there that wasn't there before. And it's very hard to do the job, I think, if you're worried about your budget being cut. Our budget certainly can be beefed up. I think nobody ever comes to a question like this and say they don't need more money. But to put it in perspective, there's 5 borough presidents. We have 5 boroughs, and we have a smaller budget than most of the borough presidents. And so we could use with some beefing up. But I think those protections and the autonomy of the budget is critically important to making sure that the office can do its job. And some of that is baked in the charter. And I think it's really important that it's baked in the charter.
What kind of successes or impact have you seen since this office was created in New York?
There's been a number of reports that I think have helped lead discussions way back from Mark Green to our office, through COVID, through dealing with the pandemic, dealing with public safety and housing, putting forth a lot of ideas that help move the conversation, if not policy, forward. It was very important to me. I have a particular style of how I operate. So I call myself an activist elected official, even when I was in the city council. And so it was important to me to show that you can be successful and still do the politics the way I do it. So our office, thanks to a great team, we've actually passed more pieces of legislation and landmark legislation included than all the other public advocates combined. So we're very proud of that. And there's been a number of lawsuits that I think have had a huge impact on way conversations have gone. We actually had one that helped strengthen the office, I believe, just a couple of years ago. In terms of we had a performer duty to sign off on parts of the budget, and we tried to utilize that to get some changes. And then we went to court and strengthened it just a little bit. We can use it a little more strengthening, but it's we've had, I think, some number of successes, not just in our tenure, but previously. And I will say again, having the power of an elected office to put a check on people in the city government that may not be able to be checked otherwise is really, really important. And the appointees that we have on these different commissions and committees, I think add a different voice that may not be there without the office.
I'm interested in your statement that there are 3 citywide positions that are elected: the mayor, the public advocate, and the controller. And I'm wondering if there are ways within the New York system that the 3 of you collaborate together in some kind of a commission or an organizational, or are you all 3 separately overseeing entities of government at this point? To what extent do you actually communicate and collaborate to do the work of the city?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the top, it's heartening to see that New York City is not the only place that's having some political strife, so that we have our fair share as well. We do try to collaborate where possible, but I always my sense is I don't have any enemies or friends. My job is just to make sure that the city's moving forward as it should on behalf of the people of New York. But to try to answer the question more directly, it's just 3 independently elected positions. There's no connective tissue besides how the city just runs. But we're both elected, all 3 of us are elected separately. The mayor, public advocate, and the comptroller both have different primaries separately, and then both run separately on the general election. And again, the 4th is the speaker, but as you may know, as I said, they're not elected independently; they're elected by the body at the council.
Hi, I want to echo the thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate this opportunity to learn from you. I have a question about the the duties of the office that deal with engaging with citizen complaints. In St. Louis, there's been a lot of reform across the last 10 years that have focused on complaints and improper behavior and how to handle that when it comes to detention facilities as well as the police. It used to be internal, then we moved to have a series of, or 2 commissions that oversee those, but they're currently under the Department of Public Safety, so kind of within that same overall department still. Do you all hear complaints that are related to the public safety system? And could you talk a little bit more about how you approach that?
Yeah, most of the work, a lot of the work, what I became in New York City known for, a lot of work was around trying to get some better policing and safer streets. So one of the bills we passed, and the council created the Office of Inspector General over the police department. That's now in the Department of Investigations, not under the Public Advocate's Office. There was some discussion of whether it may make sense to put some of the Inspector Generals in the Public Advocate's Office. I'm not sure that it does. And so I don't know how the oversight works in St. Louis. If it's similar to New York City and other places, it's very difficult to provide the oversight. I've found just in New York City, that's because much in New York City, the final word of discipline for officers happens at the police department, regardless, the police commissioner. And so we've struggled to find ways to take that out, whether it's the Civilian Complaint Review Board, whether it's the Office of Inspector General, which reports to DOI. So it may be an opportunity to explore what you could put under the New York City Public Advocate. But I think the secret would be that it has to be separate from the police department itself and have the powers to provide any accountability that's needed, that's separate from the police department and separate from the mayor, particularly if the mayor is the one who appoints the commissioner. I'm not sure how it goes, but here the mayor is the one who appoints the police commissioner. But we do take on complaints from all over, and that includes from the if we get complaints from the NYPD, and we take them in as constituent complaints. During the George Floyd protests, we definitely got a lot, and we do our best to try to find some kind of resolution as possible. We can also direct the complaints to the appropriate places like like Department of Investigations or CCRB. We also sometimes help lift up the issues or the concerns using the bully pulpit. So that's also helpful. And now with some of the protests on the campus in terms of lifting up what's going on in Palestine, we're getting some incoming as well. And so it's helpful to be able to lift up those voices. I would just say, well, however you do it, I think just you want to make sure it's independent. That's where we seem to get caught up. The independence of providing accountability and the independence of who's doing it. Matter of fact, here, the CCRB, which is the Civilian Complaint Review Board, it's a whole nother thing, but the mayor is about to remove the commissioner of the CCRB. So it's all about, I think, being able to provide some autonomy of those spaces outside of the department itself and outside of the mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Could I just ask a couple of structural questions for perspective? The size of the Office of Public Advocate in New York, I mean, how many staff positions? What's your annual budget approximately? And I'm gathering from what you said here in terms of the mayor, public advocate, controller council being separate silos, if we want to call them that, within government, that you must have your own personnel hiring system and all of that kind of stuff? Or is there some kind of an umbrella entity for the New York City hiring process? How does all that work?
We have roughly 60 staff. Definitely not enough in comparison to the amount of staff that other agencies have. By contrast, the comptroller, I think, has a couple hundred, maybe 300. Our budget is about $5 million, roughly. In contrast, the Brooklyn Borough President office is just up about $6 million. So that should give you some contrast. We're responsible for everything from hiring to HR to setting the policy of the office. So everything is autonomous in that silo. Excuse me, there are some joint things in terms of like when you have issues with the buildings, when you have issues of, managing the budget, I guess not managing the budget, but the Office of Budget Management and Budget is a citywide thing, not necessarily the mayoral thing, but it's a citywide thing. So they kind of administer the money based on the way the budget is. Every citywide elected official has police detail, and so the PD is responsible for all of that. So there are some more, I should say, of coordinating certain resources, but they can't dictate how those resources are used or who you hire or don't hire.
Great, thank you so much. And one final question just in that area then. Are you, do your employees participate in any kind of civil service system, or is it simply patronage hiring, or how does that go about in your office structure?
I hope it's not too much patronage hiring, but they are, I believe, and GC, correct me if I'm wrong, still would fall under, I guess, the laws of civil servants, but it's all at will hiring from top to bottom. That is going to change as we're going through a unionization process for non-managerial employees, so that will change a little bit. That's happening actually a bunch of different places, including in the including in the city council, which has a couple hundred staff, and I believe in some of our state, they're trying to do some of that in our state government as well. So there's a unionization process that they're being pushed by employees, and I actually think it will strengthen some of the things that we're trying to do.
Thank you.
No problem.
I want to piggyback on what Commissioner Carlson just asked and dive into notes you mentioned around lawsuits. You said that your office is instrumental in lawsuits against the city. So I want to clarify that. Are you suggesting that the city sues itself? Who do you receive your legal advice from, and how does that work internally for the city to sue itself? What does that look like?
So there's been a lot of questions around that. So most of the lawsuits that have come, the benefit has come primarily from the lawsuit itself, as opposed to a quote unquote win in the courtroom for the Office of the Public Advocate, specifically for the thing that you just said. It's the kind of the city suing itself. And so there's been a lot of tension on how that works in the courts. And so the Office of Public Advocate would try to sue, say, the mayor, for lack of a better term, or the city for what they're doing or a policy they're trying to input. And I think just doing that has helped lift up certain issues and make some changes that might not have happened. But I don't know that the court has answered that exact question that you asked. So it remains to be seen. Even the function of us having to sign signing parts of the budget, which is in the budget. Which is in the charter and was listed as a ministerial, basically saying we have to. And so we kind of challenged that when there was some stuff in the budget that we got a lot of complaints about whether it was correct or not. It wasn't necessarily a win for anybody, but it did confirm that we can't just be forced to do it, even though it's something that we have to do. So there's a lot of interesting things that still haven't been worked out, but just being able to do it from a citywide position, I think, is helpful to have somebody that's not necessarily tied up with some of the other things that the other bodies may be tied up in. Eli, if you're on, you can feel free to fill in anything there. Is Eli still on? Or Matt? I don't know who's still here.
She had to go, but I think you got it.
Okay. Did that answer the question?
Yes, but just to confirm, so your office has independent legal counsel that's separate from the mayor's office, separate from city council?
Absolutely. Matt is my deputy general counsel, and Elizabeth Guzman, who was here at the beginning, is my general counsel. We have a separate everything. So whatever the mayor has, we just have a much smaller version of that. So we have to handle everything, whether we're suing all of our HR complaints, all of our EEO complaints, all of those things are separate and housed within the Office of the Public Advocate.
Thank you.
Even we have vehicles, whether it's for the detail, or we have maybe one or two for staff to get around. That all comes out of our budget.
I had a question about something that you early on about being an ex officio council member and the ability to propose legislation. Could you talk a little bit more about what was the rationale for that and how does that work in practice? I think you said maybe there were some wins that came from that ability.
Yeah, we have the ability to introduce legislation, and I think we've used that pretty successfly. Veronica, I don't know what we're up to. I think I'm up to about 80 bills or something, but I think in the public advocate's office, is it 20 something? Do you remember? Veronica?
Sorry, I think we're at 21 pieces of legislation passed.
Thank you. That's 21 since 2019. So again, I don't know if and Matt, you can jump in. I don't know if I know what the logic was, but I know that they were both charter revisions kind of splitting what the charge was of the president of the council and giving some duties of that to the public advocate. One of those was presiding over the city council, which was given back to the now speaker of the city council. And the public advocate used to preside based on the rules of the council, which says the speaker can designate someone. I'm not the biggest fan of doing things that I don't have particular power on, so I didn't do that much of that. The speaker, even if whoever's presiding, the speaker runs the body. And so I just pulled back from that, and now the majority leader of the council is the one that presides over that. But some of the, I guess, vestiges of that was just being an ex officio council member. So there's 51 council members. I'm I guess, technically the 52nd as ex officio. I think it is helpful, particularly on issues that are being brought up in hearings, so I can go in, ask questions, give some opening statements, try to set some context as much as possible. But we have been able to introduce legislation and get a lot of them passed. And so I think it is a good tool to have.
I'll just add as the public advocate mentioned, the position used to be president of the city council. Actually, it goes back to the board of aldermen. The position actually is more than 150 years old. The position was always elected citywide and was always a member of the council, and always presided over the council until 2002. And also the public advocate is first in line to become mayor if something happens to the mayor, and the president of the board of aldermen, going all those years, has always been first in line to become mayor if something happens to the mayor. But the legislative powers are something that have been part of the position from the beginning.
I have a question, please. Good evening. My name is Sonia Gray, and I'm the Director of Personnel for the City of St. Louis, and I serve as an ex officio member of the commission. I'd like to understand a little bit better within your group, are there any other outlined functions that fall within your scope of responsibility or authority outside of the advocacy piece that you provide?
So just to recall from the beginning, we have 5 charter mandated duties. One is you get to introduce legislation. One, you're an official ombudsman to help take some of the complaints that are going on. The third is a charter cop, making sure that the agencies are doing their charter mandated duties. You get to appoint people to commissions, like the Civilian Complaint Review Board over the police department and the City Planning Commission. That's just to name 2 of several, actually, a bunch. And I think I said you get a vote on the pension board. So those are all charter mandated. The charter cop one, I think there's additional funding that can help us do that job a little bit better. The one thing I think would be most helpful is if the if the office had some kind of subpoena power, some ability to get the information that we, as I mentioned earlier, the charter mandates that agencies have to respond to our questions with information. But if they don't, our only recourse is, again, to sue, which is very time consuming. So finding a way to force that information without suing would be helpful. I mean, there is one thing outside, which is called COPIC. It basically has to do with public information, and we're supposed to put together a grouping of all the public information folks in the city. That has actually not been done. And I mean, the meetings have occurred, but it hasn't had much meaning. That was a piece that has never been funded since the beginning. So there is no public advocate that has actually done it. And I think JC had to jump, who is our tech director, is in the process of trying to see what we can do with the minimal funds that we have to try to get COPIC up and running. But those are kind of the charter mandated duties besides the advocacy.
Okay, thank you with that. And just one additional question. It sounded like to me that you have your own HR department that falls within your group. But for the City of New York, the oversight for personnel, is that put, or HR, is that, does that fall within the mayor's administration, or how does that structure look?
So the public advocate's office is fully and completely autonomous from the mayor's office, except for the laws that everyone has to abide by. So we hire our own personnel, we take our own HR complaints, take our own EEO complaints. The city has recourse for everybody in any kind of space. You know, if something is happening and that you need to take out of a particular agency or entity. But other than that, it's a fully, completely, thoroughly autonomous office in every single way that you can think of. Do you have any specific questions other than that about autonomy and what part is autonomous versus not autonomous?
I had a follow-up question to your statement about when you mentioned the council. Struck me. Your council, I'm guessing, is made up of representatives from the boroughs. Do you have any at-large council positions also, or is everything segmented according to particular areas, et cetera?
We don't anymore. There was a charter commission, might have been in the 90s, maybe early 90s, I think, that took away the at-large and grew the council to 51. So every single council member is from a particular district in the city. I used to represent a district in the Bronx as a council member. So I guess technically the ex officio status is kind of at large as a public advocate, but there's no official at large council members. And in terms of the question prior, when I said like Office of Management and Budget, Office, I should have said Department of Finance, but those are all city agencies. They kind of administer the funding, but that's their only role. So when we do have to hire, things go through. When we want to hire somebody, when we want to do something, there are agencies that we have to let know so that those things can happen, but they don't have autonomy outside of what's legal, not legal, what is allowed, not allowed, to say yay or nay. So if we reach our cap of our budget, then they would say, that they don't have any more money. If we reached our cap of our head count, we do have to have some discussions if we want to raise a head count versus what's already there. So we have to have discussions about, can we raise the head count? And when we want to onboard folks, we do all of the onboarding in-house, but they cannot say who to hire or not hire based on the budget that is existing. Yes, and I guess that's all. So the health insurance and things of that nature does come from the city. So we just pay the salaries. We don't cover the other things that come with hiring civil servants like the health insurance.
Mr. Public Advocate, how are you on time?
I think I can do another 5 minutes. Thank you. And then have to jump. And I don't know how long, this part of the agenda is, but my folks can stay on for a little bit if there's additional questions.
Sure. I have another question. So in your capacity or part of your duties to review the operations of city agencies or to investigate complaints filed by a citizen, does your office have, when I look at Section 24 of your charter, I see that you have this access to public records. Do you have the ability to compel production of records from another city agency in an attempt to resolve the dispute? And how do you get those records if you need them?
So again, as I mentioned, there were two spaces that I always thought could strengthen the office when I got it. One was an independent budget, and two was an ability to subpoena or otherwise strengthen our ability to compel. We basically got one. I mean, there's some things we want to tinker with, but we now technically have an independent budget, which I think office should have from the beginning. The second is the one you're speaking about. So they have to respond and give us the records, give us information that we're talking about. But if they don't, we have to sue them. And based on our budget and size, that can become pretty cumbersome. So the next charter revision that occurs, we pushed in 2019 for the charter revision to focus on the independent budget. And they did, which we're thankful. The next charter revision that will come, I would really try to push to have some additional power to compel or subpoena the records if we're not getting them. So that's the one space that I think can be strengthened, even though we have the power to do it, to actually get it to be done. Sometimes it's difficult. And as a subject matter or time gets a bit more tense, say between myself and the mayor or myself in a particular agency, the ability to get that information gets a little more difficult.
I have a question. Is there any procedure or process that you all follow related to internal staff and employees that either need representation or have committed said crimes that require representation, sorry?
Are you talking about something that was done outside of the office or internal in the office?
One or the other, or both.
Yeah, that stuff is always very interesting. But we have our own internal HR processes and our own internal EO processes, always finding the best ways to get those to happen seamlessly. And so we provide all that information to staff so they can avail themselves of it. If folks, are not, as with any agency or entity, mayor, city council, comptroller, there's ways that you can go outside and go to the actual agency that handles these type of complaints if the way you felt if it wasn't handled properly inside of an entity. So that always exists. In terms of something that happened outside of the office, my guess, and we haven't had to deal with any of that, and I think none of the 5 public advocates had. If I had to guess, whatever rules exist for protecting a civil servant doing their job would apply to that person. And that would not come from our budget. That would come from whatever agency, whatever the rules say, a different pot of money to help provide legal representation if whatever is being charged happened during an official work incident. And Matt, you can correct me or put anything else in there that needs to be put in.
Yeah, we haven't dealt with that specifically, but that sounds right to me.
Thank you.
Can I ask a very oversimplified question? What branch of government do you consider yourself?
Oh, we consider ourselves one of the executives.
Got it. Thank you.
Just a kind of a follow-up to the earlier conversation. Does your office oversee audit also? Do you have audit capacity within your office, or is that within the controller's office? And if there is, in fact, an issue having to do with the Office of Public Advocate, who audits you?
Most of the audits come through the comptroller's office. We issue reports that does have audit type reporting in it. So we do get information from agencies. We do review things that happen. We put out some pandemic audits, some transportation. Transportation based on disability access for our MTA, Metropolitan Transportation Association. How the process of the pandemic worked through for particularly around education, Department of Education. And so we use information publicly available, and we also use information from questions that we ask the agencies. So in that regard, we do auditing and then issue reports, and we can send you our link. Actually, if someone can put a link to the Public Advocate's office here, that will be great. And we have all of our reports there. I think most of our bills, I think we're still updating. It also has a history of the public advocate, and actually something we just put in recently, which is the all previous public advocates. So you can see what they've done. Who audits the public advocate? I don't know officially who audits us, but we do have reviews in terms of how our EEO processes are going, and things of that nature. That's who audits all of the agencies, all of the entities. I guess you would go to what agency handles whatever issue you think occurred. If there was some bias or discrimination, you can go to the Human Rights Department. I guess it would depend on what it is you're trying to find out happened. We do have to issue a report of what the office has done every year to the city council. And so that might be part of what you're getting at, some of the oversight of the office itself.
And the controller audits us.
Oh, yes, controller audits us as well. Thank you.
I do have one other question, if not to go too long. Just having now served in your position for a while, do you think that there are some deficiencies in your authority or power that you wish you had that would make your position more effective?
Since we now have an independent budget, I think that's better. Increasing the budget, I think, is always helpful. I know it's something that everyone says. Again, the one thing I think will be the most helpful is getting the subpoena power or the ability to compel the information outside of a simple lawsuit. I think would strengthen this a lot more. And as I mentioned, finding a way to make sure that all of us public advocates stay focused on the job. So I think a lot of us are, this is used sometimes. No, I think there's a lot of focus sometimes on the next position. And so if there was a way to either say you can't run for this particular position right after, or a time frame of which you have to wait before you run, maybe helpful in just keeping folks focused on the job at hand. But I do think otherwise it's an important position to have. I'm very grateful that there are folks thinking about it. I think we spoke to another city last year about it. There's only two that I'm aware of. One is in Maine, I believe. A public advocate handles actually slightly differently, and us. I think there's a public advocate in Australia, but it's a totally different thing.
Can you define for us specifically, public advocate, who do you represent, and who does your office or your team support directly?
We definitely represent the people of the city of New York, and making sure that government and policies and procedures are best helping the city of New York or the people of the city of New York, as opposed to the elected officials or we just want to make sure that whatever policies, procedures, laws that were put in place really help and benefit New York City as a whole, and that we review those on a regular basis so that we can learn from any errors that were made previously. I think, unfortunately, I have to jump. So I'm happy if there's any one last question or so, and I can jump and some members of the team can stay on if necessary.
No, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
sharing your
everybody. Good luck.
insights.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope
Thank
you
you.
move forward with it. Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
Love and light.
Should we release the entire New York team?
Yes, great. So are there any final questions? Otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much to the entire team for joining us, the New York Public Office of Public Advocate. Thank you so much for joining and for sharing your insights and wisdom. Certainly, if we have questions, we will follow up. We know where to reach you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, St. Louis.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Okay, and with that, we can move along to, looks like all the comprised article recommendations for public comment vote by Vice Chair Sheridan.
I have a question. Are we not hearing from Kathleen Farrell as previously voted on and approved by the commission related to the city manager and city administrator discussion?
Yeah, I also want to just check on the order of where we're picking back up on the agenda.
Okay, so let's see.
Yeah, just to refresh my memory, I don't remember voting on that, and so I'd appreciate some clarification having to do with this city manager and city administrator vote, because I don't believe we have an amendment in the packet right now that relates to that. And so I'm not sure contextually why we're discussing that now as opposed to when we come to the part of the working group report that really talks about that kind of a structure.
It was voted on and approved in April. It's also in the minutes. It's also reflective in the March meeting minutes. And we had them in person agree to the discussion of the city administrator, which came from the public hearing, and it's also reflective in my recommendations. So that is something that we in fact voted on and agreed to hear from them regarding.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will go to discussion regarding proposed city manager and city administrator. That was previously brought by Commissioner Nolan Eccles, and I believe we do have a guest who would like to speak as well. Please come to the podium, or if we need to bring you a microphone, we can do that. Thank you.
I'm going to sit down if that's okay, everybody. First of all, let me give a disclaimer. In representing the League of Women Voters, we do not necessarily advocate nor endorse a specific form. As we have done in our previous presentations, our goal has been to present you with structures of government change that we think you need to investigate seriously. Second thing I want to say, since people keep asking what the League is endorsing, we are going to wait until we see what's on the ballot. We have two goals. One is to educate the public, which is going to be a very big job. And secondly, after we study what you put on the ballot, we very quickly can decide whether or not we're going to take a position. So it is in that context that I present this material. During the 1960s, many municipalities began to explore ways to introduce professional management into city government. Two forms of professional administration are the city manager, which we have discussed before, and the city administrator. Many cities have hired professional city managers to serve under the mayor or under the council. The city administrator is responsible for many administrative and policy-related duties, such as budget preparation, personnel administration, and department supervision. So in essence, what this is a compromise between a mayor's office that oversees every day-to-day operation and an independent city manager office. And keeping a publicly elected mayor who's responsible for administration, but providing professional management for the day-to-day operations of the city. In theory, this frees the mayor from the need to attend to administrative details and allows the mayor to focus greater attention on political leadership and on policy development. Although some adopted the city manager form in Missouri, particularly Kansas City, Springfield, and Columbia all have city managers. Now note that of the 4 largest cities in Missouri, we are the only one that has not. But many cities in Missouri, 135 to be exact, have put into place some type of city administration. Two reasons contributed to this trend. City operations have become quite complex and require professionals. Elected officials lack expertise and time to do so. Secondly, there is bias against the council-manager plan in some communities. If the city administrator form of government is installed by charter, it would most directly affect the Charter Section 7, which outlines the office of mayor. It would also affect other sections of the charter by making all departments accountable to the city administrator per the two options, which also could be employed by ordinance as discussed below. The city administrator form of government can also be adopted by ordinance, and many cities have done this. It is employed by the city council, and we're hoping that you'll change that language, with the approval of the mayor. The city administrator serves at the pleasure of the governing body. Now, this is very important because it assumes a change here, which is agreement and working together between the office of the mayor and the city council or the board of alderpersons. Two types of ordinances can be used to accomplish this change. One, in which all officers and employees, not elected officials, may be hired and dismissed by the city administrator, okay? One in which, so that's the first option. The second one is one in which the mayor retains the power to hire and dismiss. Including in our metropolitan area, there are various examples of each of these forms. Indianapolis, which is both a county and a city, and I looked into that because it's similar to us in that regard, has a deputy mayor, but it is not appointed by the mayor. It goes through the regular hiring process and is agreed to by both the mayor and the city council with city administrator credentials. And I underscore this because this is a profession, like being a physician or being a lawyer. There is an education, there is a credentialing, and there are professional organizations which set standards for this kind of employee. It has a deputy mayor, they're calling it that, and that is because of political disputes within Indianapolis, as you might well imagine. Just for you to know, I'm a language woman, and I know sometimes what this language means, and that was important in that case. But city and county structures and duties are kept separate. So that's something to think about when you talked about this earlier in your process. Milwaukee, so I was looking for cities that sort of looked like us, has a Department of Administration, which is separate and semi-autonomous, meaning that it reports to both the office of the mayor and the city council, okay? Which manages the day-to-day affairs of the city. The Department of Administration is responsible for many of the centralized functions of the city. It is known for providing cost-efficient quality city services and developing and recommending fiscal policy that has enabled Milwaukee to thrive, and it received a number of awards for that. So I'm trying to give you some examples of something that looks like us but has succeeded. Now, the question always is, and I think it's your question, what's the difference, what's the question, the city administrator versus the city manager? City managers, and there is overwhelming evidence to support this, are more apolitical, more innovative, and independent of elected officials. They also can provide important continuity as elected administrations change. Lots of times city managers don't. Departments face more accountability when they report directly to a city manager, but accountability is better with a city administrator than a system in which employees and departments only are answerable to the mayor. City administrators, when accountable to both the executive and legislative branch, and this is a key principle here, are more likely to be caught between mayor and the legislative branch conflicts. So city administrators get caught up more in that, although everything is political. I'm not foolish about that. City administrators historically have shorter terms due to changes in administration, so they're more privy to that kind of turmoil. Examples: Oklahoma City, Cleveland, Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., and other large cities have city administrators, although many large cities have city managers. Professional administration is seen as superior by overwhelming evidence to mayoral oversight of city departments in terms of efficiency, performance, and the quality of city services. Now, I have a number of sources for this, but my biggest sources are the National City League, which you've already worked with, the Missouri Municipal League. And then I did a little bit more research to look at the other 3 large cities in our state, which are Springfield, Columbia, and Kansas City. And I did a comprehensive newspaper search of those cities to find out what was being reported about the quality of the delivery of public services, because I thought that was important. And guess what? They deliver services better than we do. And I think that if you look at surveys of their citizens, they are more, the Kansas City Police Department, which is a whole nother thing being under state control, is an exception to this. But if you look at the delivery of day-to-day public services, the citizens of those 3 other Missouri large cities are being served much better. I think that the city administrator we're offering is something you need to seriously consider, because given the political context that you face, it is, more professional management is better than none. And this is an option that other cities facing political problems and turmoil and context have gone to try to implement that. I hope that this is helpful to you. I have a lot more material, and I'd be happy to share that with you, but I wanted this to be, give you enough.
Kathleen, thank you so much for that. A couple of points. I know you said you're not, the league's not endorsing anything yet, but it almost sounds like you're endorsing the name to city council versus alders. Just a note on that.
I did that sort of as a joke, but I think I probably shouldn't have said that.
That's quite all right. We're not holding you.
Yeah. The league does believe in efficient and quality delivery of services by government. That is a principle that we believe in, and that will guide our study of what you all specifically put forward.
Just a couple of points. So the city I moved from in California, Fresno, California, had a city manager system.
Fresno does, yeah.
And I remember at one point I had emailed the city council, the council president, and asked for job descriptions for city council members and the mayor. And lo and behold, they don't exist, because that's not a professional, quote unquote, professional job where you can get specific skills required for it. However, there is a very specific job description for a city manager and a city administrator. And so I do understand the professionalism of that role. One of the questions I have, though, and we see this with school superintendents, we see this with media personnel, and we sometimes see this, I would imagine, with city managers and city administrators, and that is the risk of somebody moving to a larger city because it's a larger market. So the average tenure of a school superintendent is about 3.5 years. And so that means they're not sticking around very long. There's always a bigger school district or a bigger, opportunity for them. In the research that you've done, have you seen that type of risk with the city manager or the city administrator, that they will use this as a launch? Because you kept referring to St. Louis as a large city, and I know we still are barely, but there are other larger cities where a person might cut their teeth and move to a larger city that might be thriving. What did you find with that?
When I looked at this, I found three things, and I also looked at the sort of the LinkedIn of city administrators and managers to get a sense of this. The tenure of a city administrator is significantly shorter than the tenure of a city manager. Like any professional, if a city manager is excellent and good at their job, they're going to be sought by other entities. However, there's other factors which come into this. Many city managers, and I'm sitting next to one here, so no, not presently, but somebody who knows a lot about this, are wedded to their communities, proud of the work they do, and particularly in that sort of Midland thing, particularly if they are native residents of that region, they tend to stay because they want to build communities, but not always. City managers tend to have higher levels of education. So a job description for a city administrator, according to their National Professional Association, is a bachelor's degree. I mean, that's a union card, so to speak, for that. Most city managers have more extensive education and experience before taking on that job. Am I right about that? Yeah. Nancy, do you want to say anything?
My name is Nancy Thompson. I just want to add one little thing to this. Whether a city manager stays depends in part on whether the city system responds. In other words, a good city manager will get the heck out of Dodge if his or her recommendations are never followed and not paid attention to. So part of this is a dance between the professionalism of the city manager, but also is the system receptive actually to becoming better, or does the system want to stay as it has been?
I have a question to that point. The current city structure of the city of St. Louis, as you all know it and as we know it, do you think it is currently conducive for a city administrator position? As we've seen, we know that New York has one. In the ordinance, the city's listed as a means of reference. They also have city administrators. Do you believe that, based on what you just said, Nancy, that St. Louis is going to be receptive to a city administrator position or role or even perspective as we currently see it?
Kathleen's passing the microphone to me, you see. Well, okay, what I would predict is that a lot of elements of the city will not be too happy at first, whether it's a city administrator or a city manager. Same difference, probably, in terms of that. However, after they live with it a while, I think they would see the advantages. I mean, as a former department head, which is where I have been, not as a city manager, but as a department head in some governments, it's really nice, actually, to have another professional as your boss and have a person to go to. So one thing that I noticed when we were recently in the mayor's office for an event, the mayor's office, outer office, while large, did not have a lineup of department heads waiting to talk to the mayor to get advice for how they should do their job. When you go to a city manager's office, often there's 2 or 3 people ahead of you who want to actually talk over their problems, their issues, their lack of knowledge or whatever. So I think that in a relatively short time, there would be good acceptance of either, providing, of course, that the person isn't terminated because they're incompetent, whatever. I mean, some of that would happen as well, I think, in St. Louis, just to be very opinionated, okay?
The other things, and many times you all have said that you can't consider one piece of the charter without everything else. There'd have to be a lot of changes. The currently termed Board of Aldermen would have to be given more power. The professionalism and accountability and hiring and firing of department heads would have to change. The requirements and sticking to the professional requirements of a job position would have to dramatically change. We'd have to have a centralized computer system. Lots and lots of things would have to change. And so I think that you could start with a city administrator in this form, and the reason I talked about both charter changes and ordinance changes is that a city administrator could be housed as an adjunct to the Board of Alderpersons, or it also could reside within the mayor's office. One thing, there were a number of cities that had a position, and I heard our mayor talk about this, called deputy mayor. And again, language matters, okay? And most people who are experts in this field cautioned against that kind of job title, saying that it was political, suspect to ordinary citizens, clearly lined up as directly and only responsible to the mayor. So I simply wanted to say that, although you do see deputy mayors' jobs and responsibilities that look like a city administrator in some structures.
Well, and I guess that was the question I was going to ask, is that I believe that there is a position, isn't it, Nancy Cross, who does some of this administration within the mayor's office. And is there, because there are big changes and steps, is there a process by which one might, as part of this charter reform initiative, gloom together more services within that position and give it some more independence, et cetera, and move it toward what you're talking about? Or do we need to go from night and day, all in one step? That's just a question I have.
If you set serious credentials, then I'm not sure that that office as presently occupied would meet those credentials. I'll say that first. And I have great respect for Nancy Cross and know her. That's the reason I presented the option of ordinance, because one could do a number of things through ordinance. It's not clear to me, from what I know about the mayor's office, that Nancy Cross's position is functioning clearly and completely in that way. I frankly don't know who is in charge of what a lot of the time, although I know that Nancy's voice is close to the mayor's. That is a political matter as it is now structured, I think.
Can I comment here? Or would you like to go first? Commissioner Iglesias?
Yeah. Or
thanks for this presentation. Can you quantify for us the improvements between the three larger cities in the state and their provision of city services versus St. Louis, and then send us the example of that quantification?
I'm not sure that that's what you all have staff for, and I want to say that as a volunteer. I could do the best that I could through simply asking those cities for citizen surveys. I can do that. What I tried to do was to look up for the last 10 years any newspaper article in those three cities that had the language quality city services, trash, streets. I had a number of search words. But whether or not there is a quantifiable comparison, I don't know. empirically in the way that you're talking.
So, yeah, and I'm sorry, the way it was phrased, I thought that there was a clear demonstrable.
Commissioner, would you use your
I
microphone?
thought that there was like
Turn
a
it on.
clear, demonstrable, empirical.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, there are anecdotally and by doing that kind of search, so I wanted to tell you how I did it, there are much fewer articles about these kinds of problems. And I also looked at the Missouri Independent some because, you know, they cover some of that kind of stuff. I did not approach the cities and ask for citizen surveys, nor have I thoroughly searched city meeting minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So we currently have a board of public service, right? That really is responsible for a substantial portion of the provision of services of the city that citizens use on a day-to-day basis. I mean, there are other parts of the city councilor's office, but really the Board of Public Service is providing many of these services. So what I'm trying to grasp is why the city administrator position is somehow going to improve or alter the performance of the Board of Public Service, or why don't we just have, or is that just an issue of like we need to have a better Board of Public Service?
I want to be careful not to talk specifically about our Board of Public Service, but in St. Louis, it is my understanding, please correct me if I am wrong, that departments operate fairly independently in terms of their retention and collection of data, in terms of their hiring of people, and that many people who have not only risen to the position of the director of public service, as when you interviewed the gentleman, he told you rose from, you know, a fairly lowly city job, that very few of those people have professional administrative experience and or really education. Centralization is important. A point of accountability is important. Like I said, the separate data systems in this city, which are atrocious if you ever tried to engage them, would not happen under a city administrator. A city administrator would be directly accountable to both the legislative body and the executive body, and they have a better track record. If I just had a hip replacement, I didn't go to a family physician because I liked their bedside manner in order to get that done. It is not true. It is not true that amateurs should run modern, complicated, sophisticated cities. It's not true. You need administrators. And I think that we could all point to problems with the delivery of services in this city. I watched the interview with the head, who said everything was fine and nothing really needed to be changed. I don't believe that that is true. And I think that if you take it upon yourselves to contact the other 3 cities, it's only 3, they're pretty easy to get to, and talk to them about this, they will tell you that. We have a lot of problems delivering services in this city. That is not in dispute.
Thank you. Just for this.
Before Ms. Thomas asks the question.
Yes,
Thomas
absolutely.
goes. I need to put Director Gray on the spot for a second if I can. So this question of qualifications is I'm new to St. Louis, pardon me. Is this true in terms of qualifications for various positions and how those are set? Can we just understand how qualifications are set for the various roles we're discussing here? I'm just a little confused.
So the Department of Personnel, we do not have jurisdiction or authority over the level of positions that Nancy is speaking to. Those positions, job descriptions are developed by the administration. The recruiting process, the interviewing process, the selection process is handled by the administration because those positions are not considered to be civil service. They are appointed positions, and therefore that is the way that they are handled.
Thank you. And I will recognize Ms. Tiara Thomas as our final question and comment, and then we will move forward with the agenda.
So I think at this point in the process, you guys are getting more concrete in what you're deciding to take, in which direction you're deciding to take the city in one way or another. And I think when you bring up the city manager system of government, I think what hasn't been discussed or at least brought up in this conversation is where do you see the role of the mayor in this? Because traditionally in city manager systems of government, your mayor, like I said, traditionally, if you're going full into the system, becomes a member of the city council as the head of the city council. And so and it's argued whether the mayor here is a strong mayor or a weak mayor, I think it's problematic to say that we're going to merge certain structures of the city, because if the goal is accountability, you won't have that in a merge. And so if we're going to go full in on the city manager, where do you see the role of the mayor? And how receptive do you see the citizens of St. Louis who are advocating for accountability being willing to give their accountability power to a city mayor that they won't have direct power to elect?
First of all, I didn't come here advocating as your number one option, the city manager. I came here realistically trying to offer you another option to study that I think would work. I think if Mayor Jones called up the mayor of Kansas City and said, "Why are you a weak mayor?" There'd be a little argument there. And there are various forms of this. Sometimes mayors are part of the council and have a city administrator or a manager. Sometimes they're not. And that depends on the politics and the situation of the city. So it is not true that if you have either a city manager or a city administrator that you necessarily have a weak mayor, okay? That's not true. The mayor is freer to lead. Now, I will say that a city administrator does not have the independence or the authority usually of a city manager, although a city manager has to work with both of those offices. I understand the mayor's argument, and I assume your argument about accountability and electing a mayor. I get it. However, I don't want to wait 4 years to have a health hazard in my alley with contaminated water to elect another mayor. I want to go to somebody who's an expert in understanding how to fix that problem and how to get departments to do it this month, not in 4 years. I agree with you. And nobody is in more support of electing city officials and getting more citizens out to do it. But I also want somebody like, if I'm in an apartment and the owner is living in Dallas, I want to be able to call the apartment manager or supervisor and say there is water coming through my ceiling. Okay? I don't want to wait till they change owners of that building. That's what I'm talking about here. And mayors can have much more time. I would rather my mayor have vision, have visibility, have strong policy missions, and not have to spend 80% of their time on the day-to-day operations of the city, but to participate in the hiring of somebody to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't advocating for either system, one or the other. I think it was just important for the commission to understand that combining structures is not always recommended. However, if you wanted to pursue or advocate or just put it on the commission's mind, I think it is something to think about. What does the role of the mayor then become if you take away those administrative functions?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much to our guest, Kathleen, for providing that very well-researched position. And now we will move forward as the next item is to discuss article recommendations. And I believe Vice Chair Sheridan is going to lead that discussion.
We have 99 pages. We're not going to go through all 99. I would like to open it up to our commissioners if there's been any modifications or if these have changed or if we're getting closer to final language on some of these that we can start discussing and debating. That would be really helpful. And also we'll open it up for public comment in a few moments as well.
Well, I'll start.
Okay, great.
Based upon what I thought was a really enlightening presentation by the public advocate of New York City. One.
And please reference, make mention of what you're referencing in the commission, so we go to it if we have it.
I'm sorry, what the?
Like what aspect are you referencing that you're going to be discussing? Just so.
Well, so the public what we have previously characterized as heavy E&A reform.
Okay.
Yeah. And
my recollection is at the last meeting, we tabled a decision about whether to vote to move the E&A heavy forward because we wanted to listen to the presentation about the Board of about the Office of Public Advocates first. And so now we've heard that, and the question, I guess, that might be before us at this point would be whether we want to now consider continuing to examine that that option, or whether we want to permanently table it. Is
Right,
that correct?
I think that's where Commissioner Grant was going.
That's what I was about to get into. So, what I would like to do is continue to explore this idea of the, really, it's not really heavy E&A reform. It's also it's really the establishment of this public advocate position. I'd like to continue to explore that. I'd like to be given the opportunity by the commission to propose a new draft of the proposal based upon what we learned today. I'm happy to consider people's opinions based on what they heard today. We can discuss that now. I mean, some of the issues that Public Advocate for New York City raised, we already have in our proposal. For instance, subpoena power. But there are other things as he was talking that I realized we certainly more detail on review of citizen complaints, investigation process related to, complaints about the failure to provide city services. Other things started to come into my head, like what happens if there's a vacancy in this position, and so on and so forth. So I would like to continue to pursue that. I'd like to have a further discussion about it, but with the idea that I would be very willing to revisit and redraft a proposal to have to present 24 hours in advance of our next meeting.
Well, and because there was also a discussion and proposed amendment that came out of Working Group 3 that related to an Office of Public Advocacy, certainly there are some ideas that we have to offer as well to a redraft.
And Commissioner Grant, it was an enlightening conversation tonight. What guardrails are in place in the proposal, and I can't remember, to guard against the use of subpoena power as a weapon?
Well, there is the ability, we have written into the proposal the power to subpoena documents. What guardrails there would be, those haven't been written into the document. Now, I will say this, to enforce any subpoena, you have to go to a court, which there'll be judicial review, you know, of any requests for documents as to whether they're relevant, and that could include a review of the motive for seeking them, whether it's political versus an actual, you know, motive to improve city services. So that's natural, but other than that, no, I mean, there's nothing written in.
So under that, if an independent body issues a subpoena and the person who receives it or the department that receives it, their redress is to say we go to judicial review, or their attorney says that?
Well, so one of the things I was thinking about already is who traditionally has the authority to enforce a subpoena for the city? That would be the city councilor's office, I think, generally. So we've got to figure that out, like who's going to do it. And of course, you have one agency of the city subpoenaing another. I mean, that's done. I think we do have to explore that, but it seems to me, based on what, you know, that's a very important power.
Right. It is an extremely important power. And what I would say is that oftentimes the threat to reputation in a subpoena, even if it is rescinded later by a higher authority, has already been done by and large. And it's much tougher to retract the damage to reputation. So it just seems that, and he was very clear, the public advocate in New York, that the ability to further compel people would help them, and you can understand that. But having some high standards written into it, I think, would make a big difference.
One of the things that sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a point. Does the State Office of Auditor have subpoena power? I wonder if that's a model we could look to.
I'm sorry, the who?
The state auditor. Nicole Galloway.
I don't know. Like, I'm not, I mean, I don't.
I'm just wondering, as we do further research on this question, I wonder if models we
It would be something interesting to learn, right?
I mean,
Study.
the Board of Aldermen, I believe, has subpoena power in some cases. I think the city councilor's office would enforce that subpoena. I don't know, maybe.
Or is it the court that
Yeah,
enforces?
yeah, the
Yeah,
court
not- yeah,
enforces
the court
subpoenas, but you're correct that the alderman does subpoena power.
But I don't know about other agencies. I mean, yes, other agencies probably in their investigatory powers have the ability to subpoena like private businesses, you know, but I'm just not sure.
It does look like the state auditor, I'm looking at one of the statutes, has the power to seek to enforce it through the courts. So there's probably an example there that we can learn from.
A couple of things that stood out from Mr. Williams' discussion and presentation today. One, they still have a comptroller in New York, so it wasn't a change or an elimination. So I want us to look really closely at the role of this advocate and where it fits within our city system. I'm not necessarily opposed to the changes as outlined, but I just found it interesting that was not where they inserted the advocate role. The second, which I think might have been one of the questions, I can't remember who was asking it, about how much overlap or independence is there between the mayor's office, the public advocate, and the comptroller's office. I think it was kind of leaning toward, do they work together like our ENA? At least that's how I read into that question. And Mr. Williams clearly said that they do not. Like, there is not that function of those three elected roles, that they do operate independently. And so if we're going to talk about the role of the public advocate, I'm not sure if it almost gets convoluted by saying we need the public advocate and because we want to eliminate the ENA. I feel like they are two separate conversations.
I'm in agreement with you totally, that the presentation made more aware that we have two issues here that we want to be looking at.
Yeah. And again, I've probably already expressed that I do see with the growth of the city and the changes of the city, and if we have a president of the board of the president of the council elected by the body, we may not need the ENA, and if the comptroller's role becomes more of a head of finance, we may not need the ENA, but I think we need to disconnect the importance or the interest or the proposal for the public advocate from replacing the ENA. That's just my 2 cents on that.
On that, I move that we separate the amendment proposal that includes the Board of ENA from the public advocate going forward.
I would second that.
I think I'm playing double duty this evening. So for all those in favor of that,
Could you restate the motion, please?
The motion is I move that the Board of ENA proposal and the public advocate proposal are separated going forward.
Separated in our recommendation.
Yes.
Commissioner, would you use your microphone, please? Commissioner Intagliata.
Use your microphone.
Sorry, just, I wanted to make sure it was separated in our proposal.
correct, yes.
Thank you.
If I may speak, I just hate to take a categorical approach that, where I understand that, okay, you could keep ENA.
Use your mic.
You could keep ENA. You could eliminate ENA. You could have, as part of the elimination of ENA, the comptroller become a public advocate. I just don't, it's very hard to take a categorical approach that we definitely going to, I don't even know what that means. We're going to separate these out.
When he was discussing it, it's clear that the public advocate and their team is separate from the comptroller and the functions of the finance and auditing team. So I think what we're hearing is that the commissioners believe the two issues need to be researched, analyzed, and looked at separately versus coupled together.
Yeah, and I was just saying from the discussion that we were even just having now that the role of the public advocate deserves to have its own area of focus, and we can still have a focus on what's the role of ENA. Does it need to be disbanded?
Yeah, I don't hear anything that excludes our bundling it all together at the end or anything, but simply
Not at all.
that we don't think of them as both, but we think of, or either or, we think of them as two tracks that we're researching that may converge together in our final recommendations.
Yeah, because as it reads right now, it seems like we are the amendment is to create a public advocate, therefore also disbanding the ENA and changing the comptroller's role. And I think they're just maybe just two separate conversations, two separate amendments.
It may be that it's less about ENA light and ENA heavy as it is about ENA, Board of Advocate, either both.
Based on this discussion, it has been moved and seconded. I believe we can vote on this. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Are there any other discussions while we're still on Article?
Well, I'm not sure that we've actually voted now to move either of the issues forward. We've simply voted to separate them.
Right.
Right, no, we're still having discussion about the topic.
We're still having discussion. Yep.
What I would propose is, under those instructions, I am willing to draft various, with the help of anyone who wants.
I'm willing to help.
With the various types of either or both.
And I'm happy to work on it with you since, as I said, Working Group 3 was overlapping to a degree with some of these issues as well.
Okay.
Are there other areas from other working groups sticking
But
with?
do we need to vote then to move them forward? Because they were tabled.
I believe so. I think
They
it's
were
just-
tabled before, and don't we have to have two votes on each one to move it forward and then one later to recommend it?
Well, there's nothing to move forward yet because he's going to craft new language.
All right.
New
Okay.
language will be crafted to present.
Good.
There's
Okay,
nothing
thank
to move
you.
forward yet.
Thank
There's
you
no
for that
recommendation.
clarification.
Are there other working groups that have started perfecting or refining? I won't say perfecting, refining the language in your recommendations that you want to discuss here?
I would like to discuss the article recommendation for Article 18 at this time.
And can you remind, is that in the spreadsheet or is it in the separate?
It
document?
should be in the spreadsheet.
I think it's
I've
toward the end of the spreadsheet.
working on it for
Yes. Okay.
several months now.
Thank you.
It should be in the spreadsheet. If it's not in the spreadsheet, it's also in your email. I sent a version of it today as well.
It's on page 29.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's page 29 through 93 or whatever. It's that whole section.
Yep. Okay.
I think.
So discussion related to Article 18, we tabled it a few times, and I would just like for us to take a serious consideration related to the personnel issues that we are considering. We had a police representative here last meeting speak to Article 18. We have several members of the public that have submitted reports related to Article 18. We have members of the public here that are referencing issues related to Article 18. And we've also done interviews and discussions within Work Group 3 related to Article 18. So I would like to move that we complete the first vote to progress Article 18 to be a proposed amendment from this commission.
And are you making the request for it in its entirety?
Yes,
Okay.
in its entirety.
But my understanding is that the work group.
Okay.
Yeah, are there other recommendations in the omnibus document related to Article 18, or is this the only recommendation?
No, there are, I believe, other recommendations. What Article 18 is that is being proposed right now is a recommendation that Commissioner Nolan Eccles and Director Sonia Gray have put together, but we have not had a chance yet to actually offer our input into what's there beyond what's been discussed so far.
Tagliata, related to Article 18, we conducted an interview with Director Sonia Gray. And again, I have listed all of the recommendations and public comment that has come from the fire department, the police department, the League of Women Voters, members of the public, and everyone has had their intel and insight. I will also say just this past week, I referenced the Atlanta Civil Service article in which language that was missing from our article needed to be updated. So this recommendation is up myself, and in working with Director Sonia Gray, regardless to being told not to, has worked with me diligently on making the changes to Article 18, in addition to Commissioner Grant's recommendation related to collective bargaining is also in Article 18. So it has been reviewed, it has been researched and assessed, and it has been combed through, I would say maybe 6 to 8 times at this point. And
Has it been compared and contrasted with other recommendations? And I think that our role here, no matter what has progressed, for instance, the work product of Work Group 2 has been progressed, but I think it is incumbent upon us to look at any other proposals and compare and contrast and see if there's anything that was missed or could be improved.
yes,
Or
so
dismissed out of
that-
hand. So I would be interested to know if there has been that compare and contrast, because I think we always need to be, as much as we can be with these recommendations, perfectly honest brokers. If there's 3 ideas
I
put
think the
forward, we
compare
need
and
to
contrast has occurred when you all recommended the changes related to personnel matters and personnel issues. Those issues can only happen within the purview of Article 18. Even when we got the modern city charter from the special meeting that we had, Article 18 in civil service is the priority article outside of voting and those in the finance matters. So it was definitely recommended, if we're going to address the finance issues of the city, we equally have to address the people issues of the city.
Sure, and
I will be. Let me just be really.
I would actually
clear
love to
on-
hear from the director, I think something that's maybe a little hard is it's just not necessarily
Before, I'll be frank.
Could I-
The personnel and civil service and these sort of issues are not my strong suit. But what I do like to think of as one of my strong suits is compare and contrast. And so all I'm saying is that on Article 18, if in Section 4, the Civil Service Commission, there have been other proposals that say there's 2 other proposals on that section, I would like to know before we refer anything further that those have been looked at and compared and contrasted and tell us the benefits and downside of the comparison.
Okay.
I think that's very
Well,
fair.
and I would like to clarify that while personnel was discussed within Work Group 3, that this final document here, which is a document that was put together by Director Gray with direction from our former chair.
And that's where I like
information. It is my document.
Right.
Commissioner
All right, it is-
Jasmine Nolan.
All right, it is your document then. It is your document.
Thank you.
And there were 2 other members of the work group, and there are additional recommendations, which may or may not be part of this document, because we voted 2 meetings ago to actually table personnel because Director Gray was not going to be able to be at the last meeting, we were told. And we then, as a body, have not yet had a chance to question her and to make our interests known, to be ensured that they are included within the final document itself.
And
Thank
there's
you,
no time
Commissioner.
like
So
the present.
what you're saying
Give the
then
floor to
is
you. But I
that
think my issue
question,
here is we keep delaying the Article 18, and I would like to understand why we're 3 meetings in and we haven't read the recommendations to date, and we aren't aware of where we are with recommendations. After you said 2 meetings, now we're at 3. How many more meetings do we need for commissioners to read the recommendations that are being provided?
Hey, I'd love to propose a couple next steps.
I'd like the chair to be recognized, please. To recognize me, yes. Just for a point of clarification, because I think it's
One moment. Commissioner Dwight was speaking. Can you wrap up your comment quickly, and then I'll pass it over to Director Gray.
Sure. I was just going to propose some next steps. This is an issue that we can consider. Maybe just one thing about the proposal is understanding really the purposes, what are the main changes, and I actually was going to suggest hearing from Director Gray as the next item, so we can move forward with discussion on it.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, so that we're all have the same information and we're operating on the same information. I was requested by Group 3 to make recommendations with regards to changes to Article 18. I made those recommendations to Work Group 3, and I sent them to Work Group 3 as well as to the entire committee. So I do want to clarify that I was not working directly with Chair Nolan on this. The initial recommendations were created by me independent of Chair Nolan. But once I did submit them to the commission overall, because all of you received my recommendations at the same time, Chair Nolan was the one that took my recommendation and began to work on them and incorporate them. So I just needed the commission to be very clear on the process in which this took place. However, going back to what Commissioner Crossland had said, is that there was a request that I come forth to the commission to address the recommendations and things that I had made, and to allow the commission to ask questions of me. And I think in 2 or 3 meetings or so ago, that did come to the table, and the commission voted that I not speak. And so that's why I did not speak or provide, or the commission did not ask me questions. But this is not a new issue. It has been brought forth in 2 or 3, as Commissioner Nolan has mentioned, for the commission to ask me questions, et cetera. But it was not given the attention or the priority.
Just to clarify there, because I don't want it to sound like we've been ignoring personnel. I think that one of the issues I recollect on why it got deferred was because we were particularly interested in having the discussion with the Office of Public Advocate in New York City prior to discussing personnel, because we wanted to understand how they structured their personnel unit given this potential change that might be massive. We now know much more about that, having had this meeting, and are therefore far more capable of having that discussion than we might have had earlier. But had that discussion gone one way or another, then the potential changes that were being recommended already may in fact have looked very different than they could.
Are there any further comments around this particular subject?
Let's go ahead and schedule when that time would be that we focus on personnel.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
it sounds like we're a little over time today.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a priority for our next meeting. Would that be okay with Director Jenkins Gray?
Yeah. 2
20th?
weeks.
2 weeks, I believe.
Mid-month.
Thank you.
The 20th.
And
Yeah.
if I could ask Director Gray, would it be possible, based on your proposal, to do a red line with the existing language in Article 18 so we can see the changes? And you could circulate that to the commission? Because I mean, I could see, for instance, where you've deleted like the parity between firefighters and police, but it's very hard to like match it up without a red line to see the additions and would it be?
So that will be a little bit difficult for me to do at this point because as Commissioner Nolan mentioned, there are things that are included in there that I did not necessarily put in there. So I could not necessarily do the red line completely because I don't know necessarily what has been to my recommendations because I have not, to be honest, read through the complete document with additional changes.
No worries. Would you mind resending your original recommendations?
Sure.
Email? Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
So we'll have it on the agenda for the 20th then? Is that great?
Yes.
Any other working groups or groups formerly known as working groups want to share some additional insights related to their article recommendations?
I would like to move that we agree for the second time to add the Department of Transportation to this commission's proposal for the ballot.
Say that last part, proposal for what?
For this commission to put forth the Department of Transportation as our second approved ballot. So the question is, I move to add the Department of Transportation to the Charter Commission's proposal for the 2024 ballot.
Under the current language in the proposal document?
Yes. We voted the first time last meeting on this article, and I would like today that we vote the second vote necessary for the Department of Transportation.
Can I ask one more clarifying question?
Yes.
Not that I don't support, this is an area that I do support doing. Maybe a process question is I thought we were doing a series of meetings that were about like deeply considering things. We talked about Department of Transportation of them, and we have a series of other kind of important topics that we're diving into so that I believe it was the series of 2 or 3 meetings, June to July, which is the deadline that's in the amendment that created us, that we were working towards doing the series of votes those days, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're still back at the first votes, not at the finalized votes yet. And are we actually able to vote on the finalized until we've had another public hearing anyway?
Yes, the rules of order and procedure require us to have 2 votes on the issues related to the charter that we're going to address. And the public hearing we slated for after we made decisions. And we have to do so, I believe, I forget when that deadline is. However, we have to have 2 votes on the proposals that we are looking to put forth, or the recommendations that we're looking to put forth. And right now, I believe voting and the Department of Transportation are the only recommendations that we have 1 commission vote on. We need 2 votes on the proposals that we're looking to put forth as a commission.
And this would be to move forward for full consideration. So it's not the
Yes.
final vote, but it's just to move forward for full consideration. Yeah.
We don't have language right now to vote on, right?
I believe, I forget which work group it was, but the Department of Transportation language has been an original proposal recommendation since the recommendations came out. So I'm not sure if the original work group that had the Department of Transportation can speak to the questions on the floor, but I believe that was an original recommendation in the summaries that were presented and provided several months ago.
So we're talking about the Department of Transportation.
Yes.
So there are ideas that about language that have been circulated among the work group, but I don't think those have been circulated to the commission as a whole. And so that's something that we, maybe someone, I guess I could be willing to work on it. It's very complicated to the extent that you're talking about creating a new entity within the Board of Public Service. But I certainly think it's deserving of full consideration. I also think that a more detailed proposal is really necessary for full consideration. So I think that needs to be presented at the next.
So maybe that's step 1 is for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
We've taken step 1,
I
which is
don't know
voting on it to move forward.
Commissioner
last
White
meeting.
would be willing to help with that, but would someone? I'm willing to take a look at it, but when you start talking about drafting
Right.
language, it gets.
It's a big undertaking.
So I have a process question for my fellow commissioners,
Mhm.
and maybe some of our non-voting members will be able to help with this answer to this question as well. When we are voting for things to move forward for full consideration and then ultimately vote for full consideration, I assume we need to have language. We need to have the language ready to go. That's what we're voting on for full consideration. And for
This
consideration.
full consideration language, I don't think is based in what's mandated in the ordinance that created us. I believe we have to submit
It definitely is. So I think the rules of order and procedure sort of presume, I can say that because my office drafted those rules. Originally, it presumes that you will have an idea, that you will vote to move that idea forward, and then the charter amendment that created the commission requires that once you have some language, that you have a public hearing and give the public an opportunity to comment on that language. And then the rules, I think, presume that you would have full consideration after you have had that conversation with the public.
Okay, and I think
Thanks for the clarification.
I think what we're discussing right now is not necessarily having the full language, but moving this amendment recommendation forward. Is that accurate?
Which means
That's going to be on page 4 of your packet. So the first vote you did have with respect to the Department of Transportation.
So really, we don't vote against it after we've had a public hearing at this point.
that's not what I heard, but if you could restate.
That's what I was trying to say. I'm sorry if I'm being unclear, but I think the charter amendment that created the commission says that you will have a conversation with the public in a public hearing, that you have to have 2 of those hearings, right? And so the first hearing you've already had, and you had another one, which is great. But it also requires that once you have draft language, that you have a public hearing, that the public is able to comment on the draft language. And so the rules of order and procedure presume that you will have full consideration or vote something onto the ballot after you have had the second public hearing that requires the public to comment on the draft language.
Which in essence is our
is
third public
full
hearing
lang-
because we just had one more in the middle, right?
Correct.
How do we get full language on any recommendation?
That is up to you all how
Yeah.
you want to go about that.
We decide.
That is,
There is no process that is dictated to you in the charter amendment that created the commission, and so you have some liberties there.
To what extent?
to be fair, we have limited options at our disposal, correct? We don't have budget to hire an outside attorney.
I assumed you were asking me a legal question, right? And were you wedded by the language of the ordinance
Right.
or the charter amendment to a specific procedure? And so that's the question I'm
actually
answering.
asking a practical question. What do we do to get actual language for these?
So I think that's the confusion. I'm looking at the proposed combined spreadsheet of all of our recommendations to date related to the entire charter. It is not for the city councilor's office to tell us how to or what to proceed with regarding. We are to determine as a body which recommendations we are going to proceed through to the public and through to the ballot. We have to determine that as a collective. So the concept of motioning article recommendations helps that process to move forward. But continuing to discuss the articles does not move the process forward.
Yeah, so there's a few things that we have decided to move forward for, that we
Yes.
recommended to move forward. At some point, those need to turn into language and then be presented at a public hearing. I am not asking about the gestalt of this commission. What I'm asking is, how do we change those recommendations from what we have today to actual language we present? If it's incumbent upon us to write those, fair enough, but what
Yes.
are our choices? I don't know what they are, other than asking the city councilor's office to draft them.
Right. So, Councilor Hamilton, will your office draft language for the actual charter for us based upon our proposals and recommendations? They can assist with that. There we go. So we need to vote twice,
Thank
pass it on to the office. They'll give us back language. We meet with the public.
I have something to
So, I'm sorry, what?
I think you guys keep saying that you vote on it twice, but you vote on it once and then you come up with language, right?
Right.
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 So I'm thinking at this point, because of time and being considerate of how we move forward in a way that is most productive of our time, an alternative route that I think would be more expedient is for us to convene, use our next group commission meeting, which would be in 2 weeks, to really go through with old school, a highlighter and the combined document, draw out what exactly we'd like to move forward with as a body, have that time set aside to do so, rather than doing that in this meeting, only because there are some, I think, nuances, and frankly, I need a little bit of time to kind of remind myself of some of the language that has been drafted. So that's an alternative. I think we can use our I believe it's either the 20th or the 21st meeting to do that, which I know that we are down to the wire, that the time is of the essence. However, to be fair to everyone, as opposed to working harder and not smarter, I think it might be best for us to use that time and really just go into each and every proposed amendment and change that we have. So that's an alternative.
When is the next meeting?
The 20th.
The 20th.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a Zoom call.
In the meantime,
Like
though,
a-
we have two that we have moved forward. We can have language drafted for those two
Right.
for next our next meeting. Is that?
Yes, we have one
That
vote
fair?
already
No.
for the voting recommendation and the Department of Transportation recommendation. So I would like to move that the May 20th meeting, we as a commission complete the first vote necessary for the article recommendations in which we would like to continue to entertain.
Yes, that's what I just said. Yes.
Are you seconding that motion?
No.
Okay. So it is a motion on the floor that May 20th, we complete the first votes for the article recommendations that we look to move forward.
Do we need a motion for that, or is that just
No.
the
Yes.
agenda for our next
Because
meeting?
we are 3 meetings into continuing to state that we have not read or unfamiliar with.
Commissioner
not-
Nolan Eccles, there was a recommendation already down here from the chair, and so maybe we need to go back to deal with that at this point rather than trying to make a motion.
I'm sorry, what are you saying?
I'm saying that Commissioner Bobo, the chair, was making a recommendation already, and now you're making a motion, and I'm getting very confused.
Yes.
So I would like us to step
I've
back
turned
and do this.
motion. The recommendations I've turned into a motion to make sure that it actually happens. So we can move
So
forward.
could you?
It's 6:51.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dwight.
At this point,
Oh, wait, I think I was.
Yes,
recognized
go
to
ahead.
speak. There hasn't been a second on the motion.
No.
Could you repeat your proposal for next week? And it sounds like we have one thing already on the agenda, which is talking about personnel.
Right.
Then the rest of it would be dedicated to, could you repeat one more time?
Correct. So I'm proposing that our next meeting, which is scheduled for May 20th, it's Zoom. I would like for that time to be spent really diving into each of the proposed amendments, that language, and deciding at that time whether to move forward and proceed.
Got it. So methodically, just working through them.
Working through the entire document.
those that haven't been moved forward previously.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, all right, great. I would,
Awesome.
is that a motion?
Yes, that is a
Second?
motion.
Second?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. So I believe the next agenda item before we adjourn for today is the community engagement process.
Chair
And
Bobo, quick
Yes.
question. Are we taking public comment tonight?
yes.
Okay, at what point? Is that after?
Okay, so after, yes, point of clarification, after this
Okay.
moment from Commissioner Dwight has pulled together a process around community engagement, so I will lend the floor to you.
So part of what we committed to a few meetings ago was that all commissioners would attend 3, I believe, public neighborhood or other association meetings as a method of getting the word out and inviting people to these larger commission meetings. There's a spreadsheet that's been circulated, community organization list, I can recirculate it. And we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people sign up for different organizations to attend. So far, only one presentation has been completed, reaching about 35 people. And so just a reminder for commissioners to check out that list, commit to a set of organizations, and then to follow through with connecting with those. And I believe we already have a one-pager that's been created by the counselor's office that can be used. And the one other question I had there is if we had that date for the actual public hearing that we're going to have on the final recommendations, because that might be something good to be able to circulate at all of the meetings.
That's what I was going to ask, is I think we're getting to the point now, especially if at the 20th we're going to support move additional items forward. we've got some clarity behind specific articles that we can be kind of fielding with groups. And now would be the time probably to set a date, at least for that meeting, so that the counselor's office can go ahead and schedule, make arrangements, and we can start promoting that meeting early, especially at any community meetings out to which we're going.
Exactly.
So that one page is in our shared drive? Okay.
Yes.
And do we have a date for our next public hearing?
I think that is the question on the floor right now for us to determine that so that we can use it as in marketing materials as we go to these public meetings. So I think we have slated through mid-July, the Charter Commission meeting on July 15th, to be considering recommendations to get towards that draft full slate that then will be used at the hearing. So post July 15th, but maybe pre first week of August, knowing that we will need a little bit of time before doing the, what is it, the language? Fully considered, full consideration?
So perhaps the last 2 weeks of, we need to be looking at the last 2 weeks of July.
That sounds good.
For a proposed date for that hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too late in the process?
I'm thinking if maybe we do the third week in July, that would still give us almost a month till we bring it in early August. And do we have to, this is the question I still don't understand. To what degree do we have to get approval from the Board of Aldermen for the final amendment language, et cetera? And if so, when do they go out on vacation and how will that affect our timeline?
The counselor can correct me, but I don't believe we need their approval according to the.
Okay, that's important to know. Okay, good. Just wanted to double check that.
Can you use your mic, please? Thank you.
You're recommending the week of July 15th, the third week in July?
Yes.
That would give us a month, yeah. 3 weeks to a month.
Please make that motion. I'll second.
I make a motion that we hold our final public hearing in the week of July 15th, 2024, at a location previously identified.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Can I ask just one clarifying question?
Absolutely.
This will not take long. The motion was for that to be our third and to be our final public hearing. I just want to leave the door open that if we needed another public hearing after that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The language was that was our final public hearing.
Right. Friendly amendment, take the final off of there. Say our third hearing.
I would like to make a motion that the commission change its rules and allow voting by email. I think that we're getting into a place where it's going to be difficult to only vote in a public hearing.
I think I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think it's important that those votes on amendments happen in public meetings.
Yeah.
I believe that for the votes
On
to be
amendments?
legal, we would need to have the opportunity to discuss as a group. And if we do it electronically, we won't have that quote unquote face-to-face, even if the face-to-face is electronic.
Or were you saying general votes, like any?
General.
I think we already approved that as a commission.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
I think
We're
we can
allowed
do
to.
Zoom. We can do Zoom meetings and be able to vote that way with just 24 hours notice because of the sunshine.
Right, but I think we actually previously in a meeting did put forward a motion that said other commission business that we're deciding,
business.
agenda, whether to include people on future, all of those things, that we're allowed to do that by email.
Correct.
But that doesn't cover larger, what?
Vote for email voting was, I believe, about holding special meetings. It was very specific, the motion.
Okay.
I would still prefer to do as much and all of it in public as possible.
possible.
No, it's a bit of an inconvenience, but we can convene via Zoom along those lines.
Yeah, I think with 24
trans-
hours notice, we can
readily
get
that
together
way.
if needed.
Okay. Well, with that, I will hold space and time for public comment. Oh, yes, Director Milberg.
Yeah, just very quickly, I did want to check in with our city councilor's office staff just to confirm that that timeline will work for you as best as you can figure that out at this point in terms of having enough time and ability to really parse through the work product.
I think that all depends on what is approved, and so that's not a question. I have the information to respond to that at this time.
Okay.
Okay.
So just what I hear you saying is we meet the week of the 15th with the public of a hearing. We then meet the first Monday of August for full consideration. That then gives council's office a few weeks to draft full amendments for every recommendation that we put forth.
We may want to consider having a special meeting of the commissioners the Monday following the public meeting, which would be the 25th or somewhere around there, to have that extra week then so that we can work on final product.
And one more time, you need to have the language before the public hearing.
Oh, correction, you're right. So the language actually occurs before the week of the 15th.
Okay, thank you. And now we will move to if there are any public comments.
I can use a mic or I can use my church voice, either one.
I think for the those on Zoom.
I'll wait for somebody to give me, I'll actually give this.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Doctor. First of all, good evening. I plan to attend this meeting because I was particularly interested in the comments from the gentleman from New York and the Office of Public Accountability. I'm Reverend Darrell Gray. I serve as chairperson of the St. Louis Detention Facility Oversight Board. I am the pastor of Greater Fairfax Missionary Baptist Church, and I serve as the political advisor for the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition. Before I start, I wanted to kind of caution the commission, and I'm sure you've already thought about this, that any language that has to deal with the city attorney's office, I know you've asked the city attorney to assist in helping the commission craft language moving forward. But when it comes to crafting language as it relates to the city attorney's office, I hope that the commission will give some thought to who else can do this, because we don't want the commission or the city attorney to be perceived as being in a conflict of interest in putting together language that may affect their particular entity or department. So I'm sure you've already thought about that, some of you.
I have not. Who would be another entity that you would propose for that?
I think you probably have a bar association or a bar commission or a law commission or something of that nature in the city that might be helpful. I'm sure there is a bar association or some type of legal association in the city that could be
being
helpful.
willing to do this?
I think that that's something that the commission, I'm sure if this commission, this August commission would ask them, I'm sure they would be more than delighted to do their fair share.
So if we So what you're recommending is that we call the Bar Association of the City of St. Louis or whatever jurisdiction it is that they're under and ask them to, on a pro bono basis, help us craft our ballot language?
No, only that language as it specifically pertains to any issue dealing with the city attorney. Not
Just
all
that.
issues, but just that.
Okay.
I'm sure that the city attorney is do a tremendous job in helping to craft the language. But again, if we're talking about perceptions of conflict of interest, we want to make sure we take the city attorney's office out of any situation where it might be perceived as a conflict.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping, and I'm sure that most of you have read already the presentation that has been submitted from the DFOB in support of the original document that was submitted to this body regarding the circuit attorney and creating an independent counsel for city oversight bodies that was submitted by the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression. We supported that document that has been submitted, I believe, to members of the commission. To date, the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition also wants to go on record in support of that recommendation. I'm not going to read it. I'm taking it that this body has read it. If you haven't read it, I know after tonight you might go ahead and find a reason to look at it. This year, we are going to commemorate the 10th year in the murder of Michael Brown. This year, we recognize the 10th year. One of the main things that came out of that tragedy was the need for greater transparency and accountability as it relates to our law enforcement agencies. And we expanded that to also our penal institution, our detention centers. I would say that one of the biggest issues to date, and I'm sure that most of you will agree, is criminal justice reform, police reform, prison reform. I'm sure that if you asked anybody, most of the folk in St. Louis anyway, not just on the north side, but throughout the city of St. Louis, many of them would say in their top 10 issues, probably top 5 issues, criminal justice reform, police reform, prison reform is going to be in that top 5. Our hope as organizations is that coming out of this charter discussion, there will be something significant centering around those issues to make sure that we have proper transparency and proper accountability as much as this charter can give us. We don't know when we're going to revisit the charter. And in that light, what has become very glaring to the DFOB and other organizations is this whole idea of conflict of interest. I almost jumped out of my seat back here when I heard the gentleman from New York talk about the separation, that independent counsel. I'm so whoever invited them, I'm so glad you invited them, because I think that they spoke directly to what we have been saying at the beginning of this process and even prior to this Charter Commission process, the need to have independent counsel as it relates to oversight. This is no slight on the circuit attorney that we have. We're just talking about the institution as a whole. We're not talking about individuals. It has nothing to do with persons or personalities. We're just talking about the institution and the entity as a whole. And we think that, and I think that this gentleman spoke directly to it. Their general counsel, independent. Deputy general counsel, independent. And so we're suggesting exactly the same thing. The city, we understand the role of the city councilor. The city council's office is to protect the city. We get that. But how do you represent the people of St. Louis, the administration of St. Louis, the Public Safety Department of St. Louis, the Correctional Department of St. Louis, and the Oversight Board that oversees that all at the same time? It is virtually impossible. And it puts the circuit attorney's office, I think, at a gigantic conflict, personal conflict, professional conflict, legal conflict, in trying to juggle all of these things. And so we're hoping, and I haven't heard much about this in these meetings that I've attended, but I'm hoping that as you prepare the second vote, first vote, second vote on language, that this commission will begin to look at how do we really want to, well, if we want to deal with this, how do we want to deal with this? And what is this going to look like so that when you go to a community that has this as one of their top agenda items, that you'll be ready to deal with that. And then finally, and I appreciate the time you've given me, I want to thank former Chairwoman Nolens Eccles for her work as chair and making sure that public participation is a priority. And I do have a question, Madam Chair, to the new chair, because I listened in very attentively last week as chair of the Detention Facility Oversight Board. I want to make sure that my participation in this commission, that there's no conflict of interest. I keep hearing this word conflict of interest. And I understand at the last board meeting, it was mentioned that I'm in litigation against the city, which I am. But I'm hoping that because I'm in litigation against the city, that in no way devalues or diminishes my presentation to this commission. I'm not sure why it was mentioned, but I just want to make sure that that's not an issue. And then secondly, the fact that I think that most of you on the commission know that I'm married to the director of personnel. I'm married way up. We're very happily married. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm married to Director Jenkins Gray.
All right, that's enough.
But I want to make sure, Madam Chair, that, because I heard it in the last meeting, that there may be some perceived conflict of interest. I have not made any presentation as Darrell Gray, individual. I've made a presentation as Reverend Darrell Gray, chairperson of the Detention Facility Oversight Board. And tonight, as the political director or advisor for the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition. I've spoke specifically on the DFOB. I have spoke specifically on the COB. I have spoken specifically on public safety as it relates to conflict of interest and the city attorney's office. I have deliberately not said anything as it would relate to personnel. And so I just wanted to be on record, and I wanted to be clear. And from my understanding, that Director Sonia Jenkins Gray is not a voting member of the commission, but a non-voting member of the commission.
Correct.
And so I just want to make sure that there is no perceived conflict of interest on behalf of anything I say, because I don't want to diminish, Madam Chair, anything that I have presented to this board. And I want the commission to be able to give it the type of hearing that many of us in the community believe that it deserves. And I thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you, Reverend Gray. Thank you. Appreciate you.
I just do have one question.
Yes.
This independent counsel idea, I get the bones. I get the bones of it, but and I went back and watched the presentation from several months ago to the work group. Is there particular language that's being proposed? Like, I'm trying to understand, like, if the Board of Aldermen has a conflict with the mayor, or if the Charter Commission feels like it needs its own attorney, how do we, or any other commission or board, like what is the specific proposal?
There is language that is being proposed.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that if you haven't looked at it, you will look at what has been presented from CAPCAR and from us. And it does state, and I'll resend it, Finally, the DFOB concurs with CAPCAR that oversight cannot function without a great deal of independence from the institutions it is overseeing. The St. Louis Detention Facilities Oversight Board therefore supports the recommendation by CAPCAR and the following addition to the charter to follow directly after the language in Article 10, Section 2, quoted above, and it's in there. It says, any division of city government and any boards or commissions that are tasked with the functions of providing independent oversight shall be exempt from the provisions of this section. Members of such divisions of city government, boards, or commissions shall not be represented by the city council in lawsuits, nor shall be advised by the city councilor unless they formally request such services from the city councilor. If so requested, the city councilor shall render such services. If no such request is issued, the divisions of city government, boards, or commissions are authorized to hire independent counsel and shall have the authority to enter into contracts securing the services of the independent counsel of their choice, unquote. That is the language that we are submitting.
And I think that's the idea, that that wouldn't apply to the Board of Alders, but it would apply to the DFOB or COB or even
Exactly.
the Office of the Public Advocate. If that was
Which is specifically, and I want to make sure, and I'm glad you said that, I'm not here to advocate on any other government entity with the exception of those that are providing oversight.
Okay.
And as a person who's also done a lot of work on police accountability, that is like the best practice across the country for this issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you.
Reverend Gray, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your statements about real and perceived conflict of interest. I want you to understand that from my point of view, at least, they don't have anything to do with what you have to say in your role here. But I am a big believer, having been in situations like this for a number of years, and even having a husband that testifies and that has to divulge, et cetera, that there are, under conflict of interest, certain kinds of things that you end up just having to say, whether they're relevant or not. You say them, you get it out of the way. Well, I'm married to Anna Crossland. She's the president, blah, blah, blah. My husband had to say it over and over again. Here, you have to say it with regards to your wife. It doesn't make us think any differently of you or the value of what you have to say. But what it does is it just gets it out of the way so that nobody down the line says, oh, gee, had no idea. Maybe there's something there. No, he divulged it. Nothing there. That's what it's all about, is you say it and just get it out of the way. Thank you.
And it would be interesting to everybody that came before this commission and others, if that was one of the prerequisites, that do you have a conflict of interest? Maybe that's a question that has to be asked. But I'm saying, Commissioner, I think the way in which it was done, sometimes it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And to be very honest with you, Commissioner, the way in which it was done, I felt disrespected. I can't speak on behalf of my wife. I'm not going to do that. She's a director of personnel. She can hold her own. But I felt that it was a little bit unseemly. The way in which it was done, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that sometimes the perception of impropriety, but see, this goes out to the public. If we were just talking about this group, but what you do here goes out to the public. I am a public person. And so when things are done and said in a certain way, and it goes out to the public without explanation, then therein lies the problem. So I thank you very much for what you said. But, again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Reverend Gray, I want to say this to you before you leave, is I've done my homework and research related to how any public body can address conduct of any employee or a member of the public in which we do not have any authority to do here. It is against Missouri statute to do so in a public body, in a public forum of any kind. And I have, again, done my homework related to that. Pertaining to your concern, I want you to understand that that work by way of this commission has been done, and any violation of said Missouri statutes is not the intent of this commission. I disagree that people's personal matters should be some ethical state or standard to be publicly communicated by way of this work. The charter does not address personal matters or conflicts of interest related to marriage, only financial gains of the Board of Aldermen.
And I guess the other one, I really want to, and because I know everybody's ready to go. I guess the other part, it's the two parts. It wasn't just the comment on public conflict of interest as it relates to the marriage between Director Gray and myself, but it was also the comment about, well, Reverend Gray is suing the city. What does that have to do with my presentation? And so and so what bearing? Does it take away? Does it add to? And so those kind of comments, particularly with this board, because I know most of you, and I know the work that you do, and I think that the city appreciates the work that you do. And so we don't want anything to besmirch the work, the valuable work that we believe that you're doing. And then when people seemingly are singled out and or attacked, then it does. Then we go back and forth like this, and we're, that's not why the commission was. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend
But
Gray.
comment, please. I see
Chair,
someone.
I have two questions for the commission.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, did I hear the public advocate say that his office appoints commissions and boards?
There are certain buckets
Okay.
that he, for lack of better words, certain ones that he does.
Because then he also mentioned that his office has its own representation, independent counsel, which could take care of two birds with one stone. But also, he mentioned the conflict and the concern around how to represent the city when two entities are representing the city. And they had not resolved that yet. And that is a concern that I have. I understand best practice, but having each individual entity having their own legal advice represent one city. So we can wrestle with that together at our next time together.
Yeah. Definitely something to consider.
Could I, just as an action from that,
Yes.
I did go back and looked at the CAPCAR language, and I don't think that is included in our summary list. So I would ask or put forward a motion for us to add that into our consideration list, not voting to approve it, but
Just to add that
It's
distinction.
in
Yeah.
Article 18 in the recommendation that I put forth and provided after the second public hearing that we had. The Charter Commission staff also added and received the written document from both boards that he's on and added it to the drive that we have access to.
Yes.
yeah, and I have that document from the drive pulled up. However, it's not in that summary language, and this recommendation offers a different location for it than you've just suggested, Commissioner. And so I'd just love for this to be added in for consideration.
Agreed. Okay, so can we have the next public comment, please?
Or we just have-
we need
Oh, sorry, one more. Yes. You had two questions.
No, it was.
Oh, you seconded the motion. Okay.
Yeah, so we need to vote.
So
I
we need
second
to.
that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Next, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairwoman and members of the commission. My name is Charles Bryson. I am with the TrailNet. I'll be really brief. I want to thank you all again for the continued discussion around a City Department of Transportation. I stand ready to assist with any draft language necessary, and I've presented draft language previously, which I will make sure that I do over the next couple of days. We're not discussing, nor should you, the issue of funding mechanism. This is only about the presentation of a Department of Transportation. We believe there are ordinances that will take care of the funding mechanisms once the entity is started. We also have advocated strongly for it to start in start in 2027, which will allow a lot of other things to take place, including the funding mechanisms to work with the Department of Personnel to make sure that it is fully staffed. So we think that this is an excellent proposal. We're ready to dive in as we need to do to get the work done. We also want to assist certainly with you all on the advocacy side when you go to neighborhood and community and ward meetings. And again, my thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public that we need to recognize at this time?
In response to that, I just wonder, the spreadsheet that we have with the neighborhood meetings that we've signed up for, that are scheduled, is that public information so somebody could go on it and see that, oh, we're going to the Lafayette Square meeting on, or whatever it is, and be there for the, or is it simply a closed spreadsheet for us?
I think it's a good question. It's more of a closed spreadsheet for us because it's not necessarily that we're turning other people's meetings into forums for the Charter Commission. It's more we're meeting people where they're at to invite them in to both get their input, but then invite them into our meetings.
Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Don't think so? All right, the motion carries. Thank you.